Okay, so today in chapter 10, we'll be discussing parents and adolescents and young adults, adolescence and puberty. The adolescent stage basically occurs between the ages of 13 and 18. This is a stage of the lifespan that represents a transitional period between childhood and adulthood. There are two type of adolescence forms here. There's early adolescence and late adolescence. Early adolescence basically is typically puberty, and it involves a variety of physical changes that are associated with the achievement of sexual maturation. The onset of puberty varies here in early adolescence. The average age at which breast development in girls begins is age 10, but can be as early as 8 in this time frame and period. And also, the average age for male puberty in early adolescence is 12, but onset as young as age 9 within the normal range, and it typically ends at 16 for the males. Now, with late adolescence, it begins basically at age 16 and continues until age 18. And it basically involves many psychosocial changes that seek increasing independence. Also, puberty is the maturation in terms of physical sexual characteristics. Um, Puberty is basically when a child becomes a sexually mature individual with the possibility of being able to reproduce sexually. Although puberty is a physical process, it is accompanied by psychological aspects as well, and the psychological dimension influences the identity formation process also. This period is basically described as stormy and stressful for teens, the parents, and the family system as well, with adolescence and puberty. Okay, so gender roles and sexual orientation. During the adolescence, gender roles become more clearly established. Sexual orientation serves as the foundation of sexual identity. A heterosexual orientation is the self awareness that one is sexually attracted to the people of opposite sex. A homosexual orientation is directed toward the same sex. The foundation for sexual orientation is influenced by interacting genetic, biological, and environmental factors beginning prior to birth. Role confusion rather than a fully integrated personal identity occurs if adolescents fail to incorporate this aspect into their personal identity. So these are just a few outlining topics within like gender role and sexual orientation. I'll get more basically in detail into it when I'm going through like different steps and different parts of the readings. I'll go more into detail about it. Now within the teenage brain, it basically is when the teenage decision making is thought to differ from the adults. This is when some of the limitations and idiosyncrasies of the adolescents. Cognitive functioning are thought to be the product of the unique neurological makeup of the teenage brain, which has not yet reached full maturity. Like I said before, the teenage decision making is thought to differ from that of adults. Their thinking can be impulsive, focus on immediate, lacking consideration, and of also long time determinal outcomes as well. Sometimes they also lack the anticipatory judgment that's required to think through consequences. And a number of adolescents are responsible and mature beyond their years to find the basic stereotypes that they have also as well. The developmental landmarks of adolescence. There are basically three features that distinguish development during adolescence, and these three um, features are basically broken down into three different types. You have the rapid physical and psychological change, which is when a period when the adolescence is a period of metamorphosis in an individual's life that involves dramatic changes in body proportions, physical size, sexual maturation, and personality shifts. Individual emancipation is when the Western culture emphasizes the teenage years as the appropriate time for establishing independence as a mature person and assuming full responsibility, and also experimentation, idealism, and uncertain, uncertainty is when these changes and developing ideas often bring teens conflict with adults that especially with their parents. Now adolescents are known during this time for unrealistic expectations and aspirations, and the adolescents are also known for self exploitation and self expression, and the tendency to experiment is seen in their choice of clothing, musical taste, friendships, and awakened sexuality. Also, okay, the developmental characteristics of adolescence. When the during the developmental characteristics of adolescence, they're basically establishing personal identity as opposed to role confusion, establishing new and more mature relationship with peers of both sexes, accepting the physical changes that comes along with puberty, defining their gender roles and accepting their sexuality, initiating the process of individualism, initiating financial independence, preparations for higher education and or an occupation, manifesting socially responsible behaviors, and also the following steps begin in early childhood and continue to develop, acquiring and developing the skills needed to participate in a healthy relationship, and solidifying a set of values and ethical systems that also will guide behavior as well. Also within parenting the adolescents, some teenagers are rather extreme in their behaviors and attitudes, and most adolescents do not act out, and the stereotypes do not normally apply. During the parenting phase of adolescence, the parenting styles and behaviors that parents use, they may have to, adapt and change those parenting styles to meet the needs of the maturing child. So they'll basically change, maybe with it in each stage in life, they may change. The adaptation is basically typically initiated by the adolescents who may demand to be treated with more trust and respect, which is perceived as independent. Most parents, they do understand that adolescents do need to continue to receive the guidance, but they may have to, adjust like those parenting styles and those parenting roles to, let the adolescents model this type of independence that they're trying to prove, that they can provide and um, just forming their different characteristics that they have as well. Revised parenting styles. During the revised parenting styles, the parents must discover ways to help the teen learn make decisions that minimize the potential harm to themselves and others. Parents must gradually relinquish control and place more amounts of personal responsibilities onto teens so they can become self-regulating and more independent. Some of the parenting styles are more common in subsets of society depending on their social class. Like, for example, the middle class approaches include more democratic, egalitarian, and author, author, authoritative styles as well. Research also consistently shows that parent adolescent relations are best when decisions are perceived by both parties as being consistent, fair, and collaborative, and the needs of all family members are respected. The authoritative parenting style also continues to be associated with positive adolescent outcomes as well. Conflicts between parents and the young adults they do occur more frequently when the children were younger, and sometimes the clashes can happen because of the intense focus on young adults on identity formation. Now, it's not listed here, but it goes along, and it's on page 225 in the textbook. But the sociologist Glenn Hole Elder, he was best known for his historic work with the children of the Great Depression. He basically studied how human development against the backdrop of changing environments, and he showed how these things changes in the environment and could change life. He also examined how the chrono system affected the outcomes of development over the lifespan. There were also at least seven different styles that he also observed during parents as well during parenting. The first one was the autocratic, and this is when teens are allowed no freedom to express their opinions or to make any decisions that affects how they conduct their lives. Authoritarian was when teens are allowed to express their opinions, but parents continue to make decisions that affect their lives. The democratic is when teen and parents over when teen and parents share power, but parents have to veto power over the decisions made by teens. The permissive is when teens take an increasing degree of responsibility for their decisions and actions, but with the understanding that parents continue to have input into the decision making process. The egalitarian is when teens and parents have equal power and status and they make decisions through joint effort. And the laissez faire is when teens take complete control and responsibility for making decisions about their lives and responsibility for making decisions about their lives and conduct. Parents also understand that they contribute information and opinion which teens can freely disregard and also ignore, and when parents take no part or have no interest in adolescence. The stricter styles were more of the prevalent in larger family systems among those with low incomes and among those who had younger adolescents. So that's where most of the stricter styles of parenting were. Meeting the needs of adolescents. Now, meeting the needs of the adolescents, the first topic is meeting the nutritional needs, where family meals, the food choice, and positive parental role models remain important influential factors in spite of the peer group pressures. Um, and the meeting the nutritional needs, the appetite of both girls and boys increased dramatically during adolescence for them. So, just providing them with nutritious food and modeling, great food to eat, having family meals and family dinners. This also just focuses on showing adolescents the importance of eating together and the importance of eating the right things that have very great nutritious value. With the health and safety issues, substance abuse and binge drinking is when teens do care what parents think about smoking and drinking, and they're most likely to drink alcohol, smoke, or use other drugs if the parental role models are appropriate. There also has been a moderate decline in like drug use within this phase. The misuse of prescription drugs and accidental fatal overdoses from the substances is on the rise and has become a new health hazard among this age group. Now, adolescents are also at an increased risk for injury and death from accidents involving alcohol and drug use. And accidents, these type of accidents are still some of the leading cause of death among teenagers in the United States. Now it's suicide. Suicide occurs between the ages of 11 and 24, and it's the third leading cause of death in the United States, along with following the fatal accident and homicides. Most adolescents who do attempt to commit suicide and they fail are females and males who um, are more likely do succeed if they attempt suicide. Suicide also may be related to different type of factors, such as the clinical depression. Um, Life frequently seems hopeless to them. They're depressed, and suicide feels like that's the only possible escape for them. Some teenagers who do succeed in committing suicide are depressed in regarding their sexual orientation, and a lot of suicide occurs um, when the young people who they're just not basically satisfied with their sexuality, and a lot of them are young people who identify themselves in the LGBT community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, and they're more likely to attempt suicide than the average adolescents would. Suicide can also occur as a result of bullying, where victims are just overwhelmed of being bullied and they're ashamed. So that can also lead to suicide. Teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. There's been a decline in the number of teen pregnancies, but the decline has not eliminated the problem of pregnancies. But there's also been a high frequency of unprotected sexual behavior and multiple sex partners that result in an equally high rate of those STDs. And almost one half of new STDs are reported between the ages of individuals who are 15 and 16 between the ages of individuals who are 15 and between 24 years of age. Eating disorders also are increasingly recognized as a mental health disorder, and it should be treated if individuals can treat this issue. Now, within the eating disorders, there are two types of the eating disorders. There are anorexia nervosa and bulimia. Anorexia is more like a psychological disorder that can have fatal consequences, if they're left untreated. And bulimia involves basically when you consume huge amounts of food and then you then purge from the body by vomiting with excessive amount of laxatives. Now, anorexia is more when they're basically, kind of starving themselves or want to reach this particular weight and they're not eating at all. They're placing themselves on more of like a diet to reach this certain phase. Providing structure and nurture for adolescents. Um, when providing structure and nurture for the adolescents, the cohesion of a family system is basically threatened during this phase. And when any change takes place that affects the system's functioning and equilibrium, as it says here, the family climate rather than the family structure is related to the well-being of the members of the family and is of greater importance in emotional satisfaction. Also, just the question is raised here just for you to think about: how can parents guide their teenage children toward making constructive decisions and at the same time discourage them from making unwise choices also. So that's just something for you to, kind of think about. Parents also seem particularly reluctant to release the teen from the control limits and boundaries that were established in early developmental stages. Many parents also think that change it has to take place eventually. Well, they know it has to take place eventual, but the equalization and the transfer of the power toward greater self-regulation occurs slowly than mostly any teens prefer. And also within the peer group influences, this is also the allegiance one felt toward the parent and it shifts to the peers. The peer group basically plays a special role in adolescence because it is the process of personal identity formation among adolescents. It also is a period in adolescence where these groups become a new source for the adolescents to, redefine their personal identity. Also, acceptance and validation is very important during adolescence, and peer groups basically, um, they are considered like validation of like self confidence for these teens. But by late adolescence, um, the children really don't care about the peer groups or what individuals think. Once you get older, it's just like a phase, and you basically grow out of it. The peer opinions, they change then, and they really don't care about it once they reach the late adolescent stage in the period. Promoting the individuation process is when the experiences of adolescence are a struggle toward their eventual emancipation of a teenager from the family of origin. Although the process begins in late adolescence, it also may not be completed until later adulthood. This is basically when adolescents are basically just um, forming their type of independence, that they have, and becoming an individual who develops, their own like personal beliefs and their systems. And also, a teen usually advances toward emancipation, like by working a full-time job, making their own decisions on friends and dating. Just those type of things that just basically form your own type of individuality and your own beliefs. Supporting cognitive changes in adolescence and individuals' understanding of people, events, and circumstances become more flexible and abstract reasoning becomes more possible. Within supporting the cognitive changes, um, Piaget, Jean Piaget, he labeled thought during adolescence as a period of formal operations, and there are different type of there are about let's see there are one two three there are four different types of egocentrism during the middle childhood and adolescence, that emergence of the advanced, flexible, and thinking styles. And in adolescence, the egocentrism manifests itself in these different four type of ways that are listed on page 232. The first one is pseudo stupidity, imaginary audience, apparent hypocrisy, and personal invisibility. And these are all listed on page 232. And now, parenting young adults is also important because once the individuals and the adolescents are getting older, things start to change. Parents are sometimes unsure how to relate, the type of communication with adult children, um, who are quickly becoming independent adults, but who are still like partially dependent. They also, the parents feel responsible for giving advice to their adult children, but may feel unprepared and ill equipped to do so in ways that are truly helpful. Adult children also feel as many conflicting emotions as their parents, and adult children also may desire to confide in parents, but may feel resentful about the intrusive and judgmental nature of parental advice. Now, when children arrive at the adulthood, the overall goal of helping a child to become a fully functioning, mature person should have been accomplished, but it is a transformation and it's not simply accomplished with legal maturity at age 18. So sometimes, you know, just because 18 is the legal age, a lot of young adults have this, mindset. Well, some of them do. Like, okay, I'm grown. I can do what I want to do. I have that, authority. I'm 18. But there are some individuals who want that help and who want that advice from parents but just because they've reached that age, they're not at that time and they're not at that period where they can take all the independency, just on them, and they still need that help and advice, and that's okay. Parenthood does not come to a complete halt. Like I said before, when children reach their 18th birthday or even later, but instead, the relationship between the parents and the young adults is modified in response to the new developmental needs of the children. Some parents also do continue to provide support and often financial assistance to the young children. And relations between the parents and the adult children during this stage can be kind of strange, and confusing to them. Now, emerging into adulthood, um, there's one period when you emerge into adulthood. There's a portion of it that's called emerging adulthood, and this stage is basically described. I'm sorry, as by developmental psychologist Jeffrey Jensen Arnett. He described it as a portion of early adulthood as emerging adulthood. That's what he named it. And during this transition stage, they're experiencing five defining characteristics that he defined, exploring their own identity, feelings of instability, feelings of oneself, feeling emotionally in between adolescence and adulthood, and experiencing a range of life's possibilities. He also questioned the negative view often held by other adults in regards into the character of young people and attributes these negative views to four factors. Later enters into adult roles misinterpreted by older adult as selfishness. Exploration of identity during emerging adulthood is misinterpreted as self-indulgence. Young adults who seek identity based work are seen by older adults as being less motivated, and elders interpret the high hopes of young adults regarding their lives and grandiosity as well. Now, also, I just went over a few of the outline notes that I had about it, but also here this is basically like the same explanations that I had for it. Continuing to explore as one personal identity through interactions with others, work experience with one's environment, dealing with feelings of personal instability in the areas of work, personal relationship, and life goals, focuses on one's personal needs and establishing personal satisfaction, difficulty fitting into a particular work role, career, or personal relationship, experiencing a range of possibilities of life possibilities, establishing a sense of intimacy, and learning about the complexity of close personal relationships. Prolonged dependencies between parents and young adults. How do parents promote the prolonged dependency of their adult children? Basically, by reacting in ways that are authoritarian, overprotective, or disinterested, parents promote prolonged dependency in their adult children. Parents ideally shift away from the authoritarian styles to those that are more democratic and egalitarian as children grow older. Some parents do continue to remain actively involved in their caregiving role as well. Um, the next topic was how do adult children promote their prolonged dependency on their parents? Contributions stemming from the adult child can promote abnormally prolonged dependence on the parents. There is a fear of assuming responsibility of one's own life and decisions, addictions and substance abuse, fear of failure in the adult world, and the lack of motivation to leave the comforts of the parental home. And just another question, just for you to think about, what are the short and long term effects of such prolonged dependence among family members as well? So that's just something, that just gives you idea to think about. Guidance adult children towards independence. Suggestions for parents to prevent prolonged dependencies are to stop playing the role of a caretaker parents. Parents should let go of the ways in which they have usually responded to the children's dependency needs, um, just to show them, that they can create their own type of, just independency. Boundaries should be established and adapted to reflect less involvement of adult children, making a conscious and demonstrable change toward a more egalitarian stance, change their relationship with their adult children by changing themselves, and set a deadline for certain tasks to be accomplished, such as finding a job, moving into different quarters, and taking greater responsibilities. You have some children sometimes that are just overly, um, they basically can't do anything for themselves. And it's up to those parents to, create the independence for children. There comes a time and a point to create, some type of independence for the children and for the children to show, that they can do these type of things on their own. And now the next one is the attachment revisited with intimate relationships. Eric Erickson believed that establishing a sense of intimacy is the primary developmental task of early childhood. And to achieve intimacy, people must learn how to lower the personal boundaries that they have constructed to protect their innermost authentic selves from others. Essentially, the lessons learned in infancy about trusting a parental caretaker laid the foundation for learning how to trust another in an intimate adult relationship. And the attachment that was developed with parents serves as a template for this type of trust, which is an important component of an adult relationship. By establishing, like I said, the basic identity in adolescence, an individual is prepared to move on to the next stage of psychosocial development. The lessons learned in infancy about like trusting a parental caretaker laid the foundation for learning how to trust another in an intimate adult relationship, and the attachment that was developed with parents serves as a template for this type of trust, which is an important component of an adult love relationship. Now, with functioning as a nested family, many young adult children, mostly males, do return back to the parental home to live there temporarily. And the adult children within this age are known as the boomerang children. This is usually a limited arrangement that results because the child has become unemployed. They're seeking rechanging or change of a career or has experienced a divorce. Everyone is involved likely to have mixed feelings about the situation. The parents understand that they need to be supportive, but the adults which that they can be, more helpful. The parents also may be understandably resentful of the demands of their resources, time, and energy imposed by the return of adult child to their daily lives. And the adult child may also appreciate what parents are providing in this time of and need, but resent the conflicts that can arise by resumption of old patterns of interaction. And both children and parents resent the dependency on the parents and view this period as a developmentally off time. Okay, now in the role of grandparents, grandparents are basically known as co parenting and supporting their adult children and rearing their grandchildren. The positive experiences are because they are grandparenting part time, they can basically focus on the enjoyable moments, leaving disciplinary matters to the parents. They're also known as the family historian, like just knowing the family history and passing it on. Disengaged or distant, emotionally disengaged, and they're living far away. And they're aging with health concerns dependent. Health concerns can make grandparents dependent on their own children needing help and support. Also, just a question to think about is how is the family system affected when three generations reside in the family home and the grandparents provide ongoing care for their grandchildren? Step grandparenting is also another type of grandparenting when the grandparents are divorced after the years of marriage. Some may reduce their involvement with the grandchildren because of the circumstances surrounding the divorce. When adult children do divorce, many of the grandparents are uncertain about their visitation rights, and the divorce among the adult children can also strengthen the involvement of the grandparents and their relationship with the grandchildren, facilitating the grandparent in a co parental role also. Now, also with the caring for aging parents, um, this is known as the sandwich generation when an adult has the caretaking demands from both the older and the younger generations, and the relationship between the elderly parent and the adult child usually begins with the concern about the welfare of an elderly parent, progresses to achieving advice to the elderly parent on conducting their affairs, and finally, adult child caregiver assumes increasingly greater responsibilities and often conducts with the family member and professional in making decisions. It's also highly likely that at some point, adult children will be called upon to provide care, for their elderly parents and just to assist and help take care of those elderly parents. So rather if it's, moving with them, helping them, or moving their parents in with them, there comes a time in a phase in some point in life where, everyone has to figure out their type of role and have to, just take care of the aging parent. So this basically is the end of chapter 10. So this is going to wrap up chapter 10. You all have a great day.